official. It's official.
But when you were talking about, time and temporality, it made me think about your discussion of Du Bois in conversation with Outkast, this idea of like a type of double consciousness.
Yes.
Where does double consciousness fit in hip hop, right? Like, I mean, when Du Bois was writing about it in the early 20th century, there was a very tangible, very evident physical animosity towards black bodies. You know what I'm saying? How does, we'll
Yes.
kind of start there. What does that double consciousness look like
Mm-hmm.
in hip hop?
Right, and that's a great question. I mean, I think the double consciousness is, it's rendered in a number of different ways. I mean, one way to think about it is that there's this constant awareness of what the gaze from the outside in is and how that is different from the internal vision of the artist or the community, right? So, for example, when Outkast says, if you think it's all about pimping hoes and slamming Cadillac doors, right, you're probably a cracker or a nigga that think you're a cracker. That is an articulation of the difference between what the external image is, right, and what the internal lens is. And that external image entails a critique of the way that the dominant society conceives of black men in areas, in urban areas. Or you could say tribe, when they say industry rule number 4080, record company people are shady, that kind of external critique, it's critique of the external gaze that helps them understand, that shows that they understand the limitations of the audience or the people who they are working with vis-a-vis politics of race. I also think the double consciousness emerges in a particular way in the context of Atlanta. Du Bois has this chapter in Souls of Black Folk on the wings of Atlanta. And it's a warning where he's talking about the kind of excess, the possibilities of wealth and the seductions of wealth that Atlanta, the rise of the New South promise. And there's a sense in which I think that there's also their way of talking both for the haves and the have-nots, that kind of that doubleness where they are in the space of celebrity, but they have a way of constantly engaging emotionally and intellectually with the kind of have-nots from their home, I think, is a different kind of double consciousness, the one that is about class, about the different sides of Atlanta, right? And I think it's particularly prescient today because we see this kind of increased divide between the haves and the have-nots in Black America.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that, going back to what Du Bois was talking about, the warning, especially in Atlanta, in this, I guess this generational really doesn't understand that people didn't see Atlanta as this sophisticated, advanced, urban hub in the way that it's kind of like, homogenized into a national hip-hop narrative now. I mean, you can't talk about hip-hop without talking about Atlanta, but, initially when it was being introduced into the hip-hop narrative, it was almost like it was this kind of fantastic imaginary space. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't Atlanta, they called it Atlantis. And Atlantis, for anybody that doesn't know, is this kind of unknown, mystery, idealistic community. But when you were talking, I have to agree. I think that the particular type of consciousness that Outkast represents is not necessarily only the have and the have-nots, but also this idea of southernness, and it makes me think about if there's a really thin line between this idea of southern as a sensibility and southernness as a form of consciousness, which is still kind of relevant, especially over this last year or so, Trayvon Martin and Jordan Davis and all.